So unless you've been living in the center of the earth, Poppy Playtime Chapter 5 has released to mixed reception. Yeah, this is definitely the most controversial chapter to date, with some people saying they loved it and it was probably the best Poppy Playtime chapter yet, and some people saying they absolutely hated it and it was somehow worse than chapter 4. And I'm somewhat on the side of the haters. Because while most of the feelings I have towards this chapter are negative, there are some things here and there I liked about it. Because I have such mixed feelings towards this chapter, I'm actually going to be splitting this chapter into 3 parts, like acts of a story. I'm going to go through each act, talk about what I liked and disliked about it, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to rank each act on a scale of 1 to 10, and then combine those scores together to get my final score for this chapter. Yeah, I know it's a little weird, but that's how we're doing this. So enough procrastinating, let's begin with... So, just like all chapters of Poppy Playtime, this one starts off with a commercial. Specifically, it's a commercial for the wrong side Outimals, except this commercial is different because this one contains... gore? Well, I say gore, but with all the glitchy effects thrown over it, it's hard to tell what you're even looking at most of the time. Anyways, we officially begin Chapter 5 right where Chapter 4 left off, with Huggy Wuggy... slapping the door? Seriously, what the hell is he doing here? Eventually, Huggy breaks down the door and we begin with a chase sequence. It's pretty alright, mainly just a way to reintroduce the mechanics of the game, and this is where we run into our first problem. See, the path here seems to end with nothing but a hole here. And if you look down, there seems to be another pathway. Yeah, there's fire down there, but the path itself doesn't seem to be on fire. And since it doesn't seem like there's anywhere else to go, you think you're supposed to jump down here, right? Nope. What you actually have to do is crawl through this hole in the wall. Now, granted, it didn't take me too long to figure this out, but because of the giant hole and the fact there's a path down there, it really felt like the game wanted you to go this way. Oh, but don't worry, this is only foreshadowing something we'll be seeing much more of later. Also, I love how they didn't make an animation for this, they just put up a PNG of blood and made the screen fade to black. Great job, guys. Eventually, we managed to escape Huggy, and we are now in... whatever this place is. I thought this chapter was supposed to take place in the laboratory. This looks more like an abandoned mall than a lab. After that, there's a simple box puzzle, and oh, Huggy's back! Time for another chase sequence! Then a simple valve puzzle, and oh, another chase sequence! Yeah, this is another problem I have with this chapter. The overabundance of chase sequences. Again, this is something we'll be seeing more of later, but this chapter has way too many chase sequences. And this is a problem because chase sequences are only effective when you do them as little as possible. If you just keep doing the same chase sequence over and over again, it stops being scary and just starts being annoying. Anyways, after the third chase sequence, we end up in an elevator where Huggy is just awkwardly swinging his arms around. Eventually, Huggy breaks into the elevator and steals our grab pack as we're met with a title card! We then wake up back in the elevator, but now we don't have a grab pack. Opening a nearby door, we stumble across this dark hallway where there seems to be creepy critters crawling afoot. Yeah, these are the wrong side Outimals from that commercial we saw at the beginning of the chapter. And they are really easy to deal with. They literally just stand in one place, usually next to a door, until you shine a light on them and they go away. Then you go to the next room where another one of them is standing in front of a door and repeat this process for the next 10 minutes. Yeah, these guys are not a threat at all. In fact, they don't even kill you if you mess up. Sure, they jump scare you, but after that, they just get off you and go back to standing where they were before. Their inclusion here is so pointless. You could have just had us collect keys to open locked doors, and it basically would have been the same thing. After a while, we eventually grab this star gadget from a shelf. The star gadget can act both as a flashlight and a black light, which allows us to see hidden messages that, in concept, should give us clues on how to solve puzzles. The mechanics themselves are alright, nothing really to complain or praise about here. However, sometimes the star gadget makes this weird beeping sound, and I have legitimately no idea why it does that. Also, our character isn't holding the star, it's just kind of sitting there in the bottom left corner, so I'm guessing our character is simply using telekinesis to make the thing float in thin air. Anyways, after we're done turning on light switches, we eventually get attacked by one of the wrong side Automals. Which, by the way, this thing is made out of cotton and wool and is the size of a toddler. How does this thing have enough strength to drag our body, let alone enough strength to knock us out? Well, whatever, that doesn't matter because we are saved by this guy, who kind of looks like Foxy from FNAF. His name is Giblet, and he actually recognizes us, saying that you're the one they've been talking about, the Playtime Butcher, which is kind of odd because up until now we've been referred to as Poppy's Angel, so I don't know where this Butcher name is coming from. Also, Giblet says we're the one they've been talking about, but as we'll see later, Giblet only lives with one other guy, so who is this they that he's talking about? Is he talking about all the toys that used to live in Safe Haven? Maybe, since he mentions Safe Haven here, but that can't be true because we never saw Giblet in Safe Haven, nor did any of the toys there refer to us as the Butcher. Giblet then explains that he actually knows who Poppy is, saying that the two used to know each other. Which is exactly why Poppy hasn't mentioned him one time throughout the whole game. Later, Giblet hears a noise and tells us to hide, in which we get a cutscene where we get to see the prototype, or at least the bottom half of him. And then he just leaves, which makes me question what was the point of him showing up in the first place. Also, this is something that bothers me. When the prototype arrives, the same red smoke from previous chapters shows up, but then disappears when he leaves. And as we'll see later, he doesn't have a functional mouth to breathe out the smoke like Catnap did. So is the red smoke just like his aura or something? And also, we're breathing in the red smoke here, and we don't have a gas mask on, so shouldn't we be having vivid hallucinations right now? Oh, and I should probably mention that after this point, we don't see the wrong side Automals again for the rest of the chapter. No, seriously, this is the first and last time we ever see them, which only further proves how pointless these guys were, and... wait. A group of small animalistic creatures who are introduced in the beginning of the chapter and seem like they're gonna play a huge role, but after which they're barely seen or mentioned at all for the rest of the chapter. God damn it, this is just the nightmare critters all over again. In fact, I would argue this is actually worse than the nightmare critters because at least you got to see them a couple more times throughout the chapter. After this, the wrong side Automals are only mentioned one time much later in the chapter. Anyways, after what is quite possibly the most seamless loading screen transition of all time, we meet up with Giblet again, and he explains there's an old grab pack somewhere in the boiler room that we could use to replace our old one, so we go there to retrieve it. But for now, let's stop talking about the story and start talking about one of the main issues I have with this chapter. The puzzles. See, Poppy Playtime's puzzles are usually fairly simple. Sure, some puzzles are more complex than others, but as long as you know the basic mechanics of the game, you should be fine. But I want to talk about it here because the puzzles in this chapter are... not great. The main problem here is the lack of direction. In some puzzles, you'll just be wandering around interacting with every little thing for minutes on end because you genuinely have no idea what to do. And it is very frustrating every time this happens because the game won't tell you what you're supposed to do. Take this puzzle, for example. Here, you need to turn on 3 power sources at once to activate a platform. I was able to figure out the first 2 power sources were this giant plug and this container thing. But I genuinely couldn't figure out what the 3rd power source was supposed to be. So again, after interacting with every little thing for 10 minutes straight, I found out there's a valve here. But here's the thing, not every valve in Poppy Playtime is interactable. Some valves are just for decoration, which isn't a bad thing, but usually valves that are interactable have a white glow to differentiate themselves from valves that aren't interactable. So why the hell doesn't this one glow? Why not give a white glow to this valve like you did to all the others? Or alternatively, have Giblet give us clues on what we need to do here. In this puzzle, Giblet just repeats the same 3 lines of dialogue over and over again. Like, oh, unplug it and plug it back in again. Which isn't useful advice. Maybe instead of that, you could have had Giblet say, huh, you got 2 of the power sources working, but it seems like you're still missing something. Oh, I know, maybe try turning that valve down there. Wouldn't that have been so much better than just having him say, oh, I hope the prototype isn't waiting for us? And here's another example. Here, it seems like we need to open a door to get through. If we look at the whiteboard here, the number 52 is highlighted. And if we go down here, we can see there's a briefcase with the number 52 on it. However, because the game didn't give me any more advice after this point, I thought you had to do something with the briefcase itself. I kid you not, 26 minutes in this room because I genuinely couldn't figure out what the hell I was supposed to do here. Eventually, I just gave up and looked up a walkthrough to see what I was supposed to do. Turns out, there are numbers on the briefcase that you need to put into this passcode so you can open not the door, but this vault to access these things called the emu cuffs. So you can stick to magnetic surfaces, which are these orange walls here. Where do I even begin with this? First of all, I did see the numbers on the briefcase, but I didn't think they were important because, again, I was focusing on the briefcase itself. Maybe put some writing on the chalkboard that says, look for a code, or draw a circle around the numbers so I know, these numbers might be important. Secondly, I thought I had to do something so I could get through the door and into the room. Not that I was supposed to open this random vault, which apparently gives me a power-up so I can attach to magnetic surfaces. And finally, how the hell am I supposed to know what magnetic surfaces are? That could be literally anything. How was I supposed to know you were specifically talking about these orange walls? You could have, at the very least, colored the magnetic surfaces text orange so I would have known, okay, I'm looking for something orange. You see what I mean? Most of the puzzles in this chapter are so frustrating simply because the game won't tell you what you're supposed to do. And yes, you could make the argument that it would make the game too easy, but my brother in Christ, how am I supposed to solve your puzzle if I don't even know what the puzzle is? Anyways, getting back on track, before all the frustrating puzzles I just talked about, we met back up with Giblet again and his friend Chum. Giblet explained that somewhere in the factory, there's a file that might reveal the prototype's weakness. What is he, a Pokemon? Actually, considering that he's supposed to be an amalgamation of all the other characters, He might be Mewtwo. After all the frustrating puzzles, we find the prototype's file and bring it back to Giblet and Chum. But oh no, the prototype is here. How inconvenient. While Giblet hides, we actually overhear the prototype talking to Chum. Oh no, the character we just met might betray us. The prototype then leaves and Chum says goodbye to us. I'm not sure what happened to Giblet, but honestly, considering the track record this series has, Giblet probably would have died either way. And this is where Act 1 ends. Yeah, I think it goes without saying this is a pretty bad start to the chapter. Too many chase sequences, frustrating puzzles, pointless characters, and we're only a third of the way in, mind you. But for now, let's stop talking about that and move on to... After wandering around for a bit, we eventually find a part of the laboratory labeled reanimation, and from here we're introduced to a new mechanic, or rather a new hand, the conductive hand. It's basically an enhanced version of the green hand from chapter 2, being able to hold electricity but also possessing fire and ice powers as well. I actually really like the concept of this. The idea of taking a previous game mechanic and expanding on it to make it more complex is an idea I genuinely love. But sadly, it's pretty underwhelming in execution, since most of the puzzles involving it just have you freezing something with the ice ability, breaking said frozen thing, and then burning something with the fire ability in that exact order. Again, I do really like the concept of this, it's just a shame it's so poorly utilized. Once we're actually in reanimation, we then find this big machine and we're tasked with finding memories. And somehow that's not even top 5 of the weirdest things in this game. After this, we're met with a pretty simple valve puzzle. We just need to use the black light here to figure out what valves we need to turn in the correct order to clear gas from a room. And once we clear said gas, we find our first memory. We then plug the memory into the computer, step inside the machine, and... oh! This is interesting. Yeah, for the first time, not only do we get to see from the perspective of one of the monsters, but we also get to see how exactly Playtime Co. handled their experiments. In this memory, we, or Huggy I suppose, is tasked with putting shapes in a box and putting any objects that don't fit into the box in the garbage can. Eventually, Huggy seems to get frustrated, don't worry buddy, I feel ya, and then the memory ends. After exploring for a bit, we find a bunch of small rooms with projectors in them. Here it's another pretty simple puzzle. You need to charge the conductive hand with electricity and then sprint to the next room to power up the projectors before the charge runs out. Once we turn on the projectors, we find out that this whole place is basically a mind control facility, with all the videos involving this lady, whose name is Miss Gracie, talking about how great it would be if you were a toy, and if you just go to sleep, you'll wake up as a toy. Though honestly, if I was a kid and saw this, I probably would never want to go to sleep again. Jokes aside, it is actually kinda sad that we get to see how Playtime Co. basically tricked kids into thinking that being a toy would be so great, only for them to realize that everything they said was a lie, and we get to see what kind of experiments Playtime Co. forced them to do every single day. We eventually find the other two memories and go back to the machine. Memory 2 starts us off as Huggy Wuggy again, but this time we actually see other toys, specifically the smiling critters. This experiment is basically just musical chairs. We have to move whenever the music is playing, and when it stops, we need to go to our appropriate spot. One of the smiling critters doesn't want to participate in the experiment, however, so Miss Gracie tells us to throw them into the bad toy box, which I'm assuming is basically them getting thrown into a grinder. After a while, Miss Gracie then tasks us with throwing the rest of the smiling critters into the bad toy box, even though all of them were participating in the experiment and they weren't doing anything wrong. And here I got soft locked. What? What? Oh! Oh! Oh gosh dang it, I got soft locked. How did you get like that? Oh my gosh. Thankfully, I didn't lose too much progress, but I'm still confused why this happened in the first place. Anyways, finishing off with Memory 3, we see Huggy getting taken to a room very similar to the mind control rooms from earlier by one of the employees. However, Huggy eventually breaks free and begins chasing down the employee before finally killing him. Pretty simple, but I do like it because, again, it's the first time we get to see one of the monsters killing someone from their point of view. After this, we get the code to a door that was previously locked, and now that I think about it, it's been a while since we've seen Huggy. Oh, hey, buddy! Yeah, this is yet another chase sequence, but at least this one is pretty short. We then fall down a vent where it seems like Huggy's got us cornered, but then a projector turns on and seems to show a video of Kissy Missy. And whether it's because Huggy has PTSD from the projectors, or because he misses his wife, he breaks through the wall. And from here, we begin an actual horror sequence. We need to power up these projectors and move some batteries around to open a door to escape, all while Huggy is roaming around looking for us. I'm not gonna lie, there were some moments where I was really close to Huggy without him noticing me, and I was genuinely horrified. Wow, this is the first time the game actually feels scary. Admittedly, the one problem I do have with it is similar to the frustrating puzzles. There are some parts where it's not clear what you need to do, like having to use the emu cuffs to grab onto the ceiling to access a room containing a battery. But for the most part, it's a nice, nerve-wracking segment, and it is such a nice change of pace compared to the rest of the chapter. And after that, that's the end of Act 2. This is a huge improvement compared to Act 1. The puzzles weren't frustrating, all the lore drops we got were pretty nice, and the segment with Huggy at the end was really good. I also think it helped that we were all alone for this whole act, and because of that, we got a good amount of tension built up, which then culminated with the chase sequence, and hey, that's how a chase sequence is supposed to work. You do it sparingly, and you try to build it up with tension. So yeah, overall, I actually liked this act. So let's see if we can keep this momentum going in... After escaping Huggy, we end up in... Garden of Bandman? In order to get through here, we have to power up this train so we can activate this door over here. After doing so, we make our way through the rest of whatever this place is supposed to be, and then we leave. Oh god, not another new character. Yeah, this is Lily. Yet another new character that we've never seen or heard of before. She kidnaps us and brings us to her mansion, where she then tells us to go find crumpets from the basement. I have genuinely no idea what's going on right now, but I guess I have no other choice. We make our way to the basement where, surprise, Poppy's here! And... Kissy Missy. Yeah, I have a bit of a problem with this. See, in Chapter 4, there was a scene where it seemed like Kissy had sacrificed herself to keep us alive. And it was actually kind of an impactful moment because Kissy had been our ally as early as Chapter 2. Yeah, obviously it wasn't so emotional it will make you cry, but the scene itself did have some impact. But then we get to this part where it turns out all that impact was for nothing because she's still alive. Yay. That whole scene means nothing now. Anyways, Poppy then explains that this place is actually called Sweet Street and that she, quote, didn't know she was still here after all this time. Poppy then asks us to help her and Kissy get out of their cell, but we don't have time for that now because we've got a tea party to attend to. After we give Lily the crumpets she asked for, she tells us to find her 3 friends, aka her stuffed animals. I'm gonna skip ahead a bit because this part mainly just consists of puzzles, but basically we find all of Lily's stuffed animals and what seems to be a secret room. We then jump through this window, and I can't be the only one who feels like we shouldn't have been able to go through this window. Like, for some reason, this just feels wrong. Anyways, we eventually make our way into Lily's bedroom where we steal a key. We then go back into the basement, do more puzzles, definitely should have been seen by Lily here. Seriously, how did she not see us? And then we're finally able to free Poppy and Kissy. But then suddenly all the lights go out and Lily forces us to play a game. It's pretty much just red light, green light, except we need to use the black light to run down a specific path. If you stray off the path or move when you're not supposed to, you die. We eventually escape to the attic, but Lily ends up catching us anyway. When we wake back up, Lily has tied us all to chairs and is forcing us to participate in her tea party, where she then says, "Our special guest is here," who turns out to be the prototype. Yup, after all this time, we are finally about to come face to face with the main villain of the game. But before talking about the prototype, can I just mention the weird face Lily makes here? Like, what the hell is this? Anyways, the prototype's design... meh, it's okay. The design itself looks cool, but I feel like it kinda clashes with what we've been told about the prototype so far. Up until now, the prototype has been described as this abomination, taking different parts of the monsters we've defeated throughout the chapters to strengthen its body. But yet, the only part of him that fits that description are the 3 arms we see coming out of his chest. Again, the design itself looks cool, but I personally think that when it comes to judging character design, you should base it less on the design itself and more on how well the design fits the character, hence the term character design. And like I just said, this design just doesn't quite fit what we've been told about the prototype up until now. Poppy and the prototype then argue for a bit, with the prototype revealing that he killed all the orphans, and that he was the one to put Poppy in the case we saw in Chapter 1. Then the prototype... kills Poppy? Alright, I'll admit that is a pretty bold thing to do. To have your main villain just kill one of the protagonists like that, since it can reinforce to the audience just how much of a threat your main villain is supposed to be. Though, considering Kissy came back when she was supposed to die, I doubt this will last for long. The prototype then turns to us, and remember earlier when I said the wrong side animals are only mentioned one time much later in the chapter? Yeah, this is that mention. It just makes me wonder, if you're going to reintroduce new characters that are only in the beginning of the chapter, and then just suddenly disappear for the rest of it, why bother adding those characters in at all? Instead, why not make Lily the person we see in the commercial at the beginning of the chapter, and just replace the wrong side Automals with the smiling or nightmare critters? That way, not only do you foreshadow Lily's appearance earlier on in the chapter instead of her just showing up without any anticipation, but it also makes the chapter feel more connected to previous chapters because you're actually including characters from those chapters instead of just scrapping them all together. And while we're on the topic of characters, Giblet also feels kind of pointless, since he more so just takes the role Poppy previously had, and he claims that Poppy and him know each other, despite the fact Poppy has never mentioned him before. And Chum is even worse since he only has like 5 minutes of screen time in total. This chapter was at its best in Act 2, when we were all by ourselves without someone to guide us. In fact, that would actually make this chapter a lot more unnerving. Not only would we start off without a grab pack, but we would also be all alone for most of the chapter. It would have given the rest of the chapter a lot more tension, but sadly that is ruined by the inclusion of the new characters. Most people tend to say Chapter 4 had by far the worst execution of introducing new characters, but I would actually argue it's at its worst here. Because in Chapter 4, it wasn't really the inclusion of the new characters themselves that ruined the story, they just felt underused in the grand scheme of things. But this time, their inclusion is what makes the chapter worse. After the prototype kills Poppy, Kissy then attacks the prototype and then he... runs away? I thought the prototype was supposed to be super strong and that the only way we could defeat him was by finding his weakness. Apparently that's all a lie because all Kissy had to do was stab the prototype one time and then he just runs away. Clearly he isn't as strong as you guys think he is, but now we finally reached this part. Now, for most of this review, I've been keeping things civil with some lighthearted jokes in between, because while reviews that are just the reviewer screaming and complaining about how horrible the game is can be funny, they usually don't offer any sort of constructive criticism. And I personally think, unless the thing you're reviewing is really bad, you should try to offer some constructive criticism. But this part right here is where I reached my breaking point, because this part, this chase sequence, is easily the worst part of this entire goddamn chapter. I hate every single part of this chase sequence because it is the culmination of everything I hate about this chapter. First of all, you need to go through this door, but you can only go through this door once you trigger Lily here. Then there's a magnetic surface here, which you need in order to cross this gap. The problem is that the hitboxes on this metal right here are so broken that you'll just end up getting stuck on it for no reason. And normally this wouldn't be a bad thing, but this chase sequence has a timer mechanic where if you take too long to get to the next room, Lily instantly teleports to you and kills you. And this is really frustrating because not only are you trying to get over this gap while dealing with broken-ass hitboxes, but you also need to do it quickly or else you'll die. After this, you grab another magnetic surface, and it's not at all clear where you're supposed to go here. Turns out, you're supposed to go back to across this room over here when no one would think of doing that because that's where Lily is. Oh, but just look at this part. See, I tried to go right here, but for some reason, there's an invisible wall here. So then I turn around, but I can't go this way either. Well, it turns out I was actually right the first time, and you are supposed to go this way. But turns out that invisible wall was actually just hitboxes for models that didn't load in yet. So then I crouched underneath the bookshelves. But remember that timer mechanic from earlier? Well, apparently I took too long here. So right before I was about to leave the room, Lily teleported to me and killed me. That is complete bullshit. So after that, I managed to get to the attic and then the roof of the house. And I didn't have a damn clue where I was supposed to go here. What you're supposed to do is grab a metallic surface here, then grab a handle on the side of this cloud so you can grab another metallic surface, and then you need to grab two more metallic surfaces, one on this cloud way up top and another one above this platform. And the thing is, if this was a normal puzzle, I wouldn't mind this. But the thing is, you are being chased. You don't have time to think because you are trying to run away from someone who's trying to kill you. Chase sequences are supposed to rely on quick thinking in order for the player to escape. This is the complete opposite of that. Everything here is set up like a normal puzzle where you need to stop and think about what to do next. I can't believe I'm saying this, but they made a chase sequence where you need to slow down and take your time, which defeats the whole point of a chase sequence. So after this chase sequence, Lily falls off a cloud and dies. Thank God. After that, we go through this door, down this hallway, and... holy hell, where have you been for the past 3 hours? Giblet then takes us to the next room where we see Kissy and Poppy, who is still alive. Yay. Poppy then recognizes Giblet, and Giblet reminds us how we still need to find that backup. Oh yeah, remember when that was supposed to be the plot? After this, we go back to reanimation, do a couple of pretty simple puzzles, and oh look, Huggy's back. Time for another chase sequence. This whole chapter is just the same thing over and over again. Do a couple of puzzles, Huggy Wuggy chase sequence. Do a couple of puzzles, Huggy Wuggy chase sequence. It's the same thing again and again, and I'm getting so sick of it. And once we're done with this chase sequence, it seems like Huggy's about to kill us. But then he sees Kissy Missy, and then they both talk it out? I think? But then, shock of all shocks, the prototype shows up and kills Huggy and Kissy. We'll forget that last time, Kissy was able to easily scare the prototype off, and considering Kissy and Poppy both came back after they should have died, I highly doubt that she's actually dead here. We then board this train and begin the final battle, with us going head to head with the prototype. Here it is. 5 chapters and 5 years of anticipation have all been leading up to this very moment. The final encounter against the prototype, and it's another chase sequence. I would start complaining again, but by this point, I just don't have it in me to start ranting about chase sequences again. Eventually, we crash the train and it seems like the prototype is dead. But oh no, he isn't dead! We then start running away and the prototype kills us. Yeah, the prototype actually manages to kill us here, and then drops us in a pool of acid. And as the screen slowly fades to black, we hear Poppy repeating a monologue from chapter 3, with the final words being, "Welcome home." And that's the end of Poppy Playtime. Wait, what? Yup! Turns out this whole sequence was actually just a fake out, and Gilbert managed to bring us back to life. Admittedly, it is a pretty good fake out, but I think the whole Giblet reviving us thing makes no sense because wouldn't our body have completely dissolved in the acid by now? And if Giblet managed to get us out of the tank before our body dissolved, does that mean Giblet is immune to the acid? Anyways, Giblet then talks about how he's not a hero and he's concerned about Poppy and Kissy, even though they've come back from the dead before, so I highly doubt this time will be any different. Oh, and also I didn't mention this earlier, but when we first reunited with Giblet, we didn't see Chum. Nor was he even mentioned by any of the other characters. Man, Chum was so forgettable, even the other characters forgot he existed. Giblet then brings us to a server room with a computer that contains the backup. We then turn on the computer and... So I guess every character in this franchise can just come back from the dead. Now, many people have praised this part simply for the return of the Doctor, and while I do like the Doctor as a character, I once again have a problem with this. Really? This guy? The guy who we were able to so easily defeat in Chapter 4? The guy who had quite possibly one of the most underwhelming defeats in the whole series? This guy is the key to stopping the prototype? Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. And that's it. No, really, that's the end of the chapter. Now, when I first played this, I was really confused. Why would Mob just randomly end the final chapter like this? Well, that's because this isn't the final chapter. We're getting a chapter 6. Okay, let's talk about this. I wanted to make a separate part for this because this just kind of baffles me. This really feels like it should have been the final chapter, with us finally confronting the main villain of the game, and Huggy finally becoming an antagonist again after all the foreshadowing surrounding his return. So, why would they make a 6th chapter instead of ending it right here? Well, it's simple. Mob doesn't want Poppy Playtime to become irrelevant. Here's the thing. When you release a game and it gets popular, people aren't going to talk about it forever. Eventually, people are going to move on to something else. I feel like this can be explained perfectly with another indie horror game, Bendy and the Ink Machine. Every time a new chapter of Bendy would be released, most people would play the game or make videos talking about theories they had for the game for a few weeks, and then they would stop talking about it until a new chapter was released. And once Chapter 5 was released, aka the final chapter, the game saw a slow decline in popularity simply because there were no more chapters. The game was over. Let's Play YouTubers stopped making videos about it because there was no more game for them to play, and people stopped making theories about the story because there was no more story. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with people choosing to stop talking about one specific game, but I think this is what Mob is afraid of. They're afraid that once they release the chapter, there'll be nothing left for people to play or speculate on. So eventually, people will just stop talking about Poppy Playtime. So I think because of this fear, Mob had an idea. What if we just didn't end Poppy Playtime? What if we just kept making new chapters and the story never ended? Then people wouldn't stop talking about our game. Mob, here's the thing. The reason why people play your game and make theories about it in the first place is because they want to see how the story ends. They want to see how all the plot lines and characters you've been building up are all gonna culminate in one big finale. If you just keep making new chapters and never give a proper conclusion to the story, not only are you going to ruin your story in the process, but your audience is eventually going to get bored and leave. Look, I completely understand that you probably love seeing people talking or making videos about your game, and you probably don't want to let that go. But if you are writing a story, you need to write the ending for that story, or else all the build-up you've had throughout the story will amount to nothing. I swear if Chapter 6 ends on a cliffhanger with the Doctor killing the prototype and having him become the main villain, I'm gonna lose it. Also, this is admittedly a bit off topic, but another concern I have for this game is the pricing. See, aside from Chapter 1, all chapters from Poppy Playtime have cost money. But the thing is, they've been making the price more expensive with each chapter, with Chapter 2 being $10, Chapter 3 being $15, and Chapter 4 being $20. Now, thankfully, they didn't increase the price for Chapter 5, keeping it at the $20 price point. But I'm bringing this up now because if Chapter 6 also ends up being $20, and assuming they're not going to be making any more chapters after that, this game is going to cost in total $85. $85! That is just ridiculous. $85 for this game feels like a scam, especially when you compare it to other horror games. The Resident Evil 4 remake, which has often been regarded as one of the best horror games ever made, only costs $40. Half of the price of what this game is going to cost. And it gets even worse when you compare it to other indie games. Games like Hollow Knight Silksong, Cuphead, Deltarune. Games that have just as much, if not more, content than Poppy Playtime does for only $20 to $30. And even at its worst, that is still only a third of the price. Usually, games that are set at a really high price point are high quality AAA games. Games like Red Dead Redemption 2, Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring. Games that have mountains upon mountains of content. And those games still cost less than this game will. Look, even if you disagree with me and you really liked Chapter 5, you have to admit, $85 for an indie horror game that mainly consists of nothing but puzzles and chase sequences is way too much. This game should cost at most $50, and even then, that's still asking for a bit much. Anyways, I'm sorry I got sidetracked there. Let's wrap this up already. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm now gonna rank each act and then combine the scores together for how I felt about this chapter overall. Act 1 is easily a 3 out of 10 for me. For the most part, it's just pretty boring with some frustrating puzzles thrown in there and a few alright chase sequences near the beginning. Act 2 gets a solid 7 out of 10. It's easily the best part of the whole chapter. The puzzles are simpler, it actually takes place in the laboratory, and we got to see more of how Playtime Co. handled their experiments. There was only one pretty short chase sequence, and the horror segment with Huggy Wuggy was really good. And Act 3 gets a 4 out of 10. Overall, I would say it's slightly better than Act 1, but only because it has a little more varied gameplay, and instead of frustrating puzzles, it only has one really frustrating chase sequence. So, combining all the scores together, I give Poppy Playtime Chapter 5 a 4.5 out of 10. Let's hope that's not how many chapters this game is gonna have.